Welcome back to Reason and Theology. Got a very important message that I want to cover today. Before we take a look at what is taking place in Gaza, I want to read a couple passages to you from the Bible that I think you might find interesting, beneficial, and maybe even related to what we're about to discuss. Let's go ahead and take a look at a few of these. This is coming from Proverbs 31, 8 through 9. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. Isaiah 1:17 says, learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. Psalm 82, 3 through 4. Defend the weak and fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. Jeremiah 22, 3 says, this is what the Lord says, do what is just and right. Rescue from the hand of the oppressors the one who has been robbed. Do no wrong or violence to the foreigner, the fatherless, or the widow, and do not shed innocent blood in this place. I bring this up for many reasons. Number one, we need to speak up for those who don't have a voice. We need to defend those who are oppressed against the evil and against the wicked. I also bring this up because these are passages that were revealed in the context of the Old Testament to the Israelites. And God continued to tell them over and over and over, stop oppressing people. Start defending the oppressed. Oppose evil. Don't shed innocent blood. Defend the weak, defend the oppressed. Why? Because this was something that Israel was constantly violating. If you have the ears to hear, you'll understand what I'm saying. Now, let's take a look at the situation that's going on in Gaza. Let me share my screen. This is being reported all over from numerous sources. Although Israel does not allow third-party journalists to go into Gaza to find out independently what is going on, they forbid it. We still are able to find out what is going on to a certain degree by eyewitnesses, by technology, by cell phones of people recording events. In this particular situation, this is being reported by numerous outlets, conservative, liberal, pro-Israel, against Israel, you name it, everyone's reporting this event. Here's one from the BBC. Whether you like them or not, pick your poison. There's many others that were reporting this as well. Israeli forces kill 51 Palestinians waiting for flour at Gaza aid site, witnesses and rescuers say. This isn't an isolated event. This is a daily occurrence. On a daily basis, civilians, children are being killed for several years now. It's not an isolated event. People can't say, but wait, well, there's only so many times that works. At some point, it runs out of gas. And the death toll of civilians, including children at this point, at some point becomes indefensible. Israeli forces have killed more than 51 Palestinians and wounded many more after opening fire near an aid distribution site in southern Gaza, witnesses and rescuers say. According to witnesses, the Hamas-run Civil Defense Agency said Israeli troops fired on crowds near the aid site in Khan Yunis. More than 200 people were reportedly injured. And some people might say, well, it's got to be biased because it's Hamas-run, right? Well, here's the solution to that. Israel could easily allow independent third-party journalists in Gaza to ascertain the facts independently, right? But they chose not to. And have chosen not to for 2 years now. Ask the question, why is that? The Israeli military has told the BBC it is looking into the reports. It's what they say every time. You say, we'll look into it. We'll take a look. We'll figure out what's going on. They say that every single time. Have you noticed a pattern? It is the latest and potentially the deadliest of the almost daily shootings that have been taking place recently near aid distribution sites in Gaza. Almost all the casualties in Gaza in recent days have been linked to the delivery of aid rather than Israeli strikes on Hamas targets. So there seems to be a correlation. People going to receive aid, civilians getting killed. Witnesses say that Israeli forces opened fire and shelled an area near a junction to the east of Khan Yunis where thousands of Palestinians had been gathering in the hope of getting flour from a World Food Program site, which also includes a community kitchen nearby. You remember when one of these food trucks was bombed by Israel? You remember that? And it clearly said on the top of it that this was a World Food truck, and you remember that they were in constant communication with the Israeli military to let them know it's them and it's not Hamas like hijacking this food truck. You remember when that happened? That's just one example among many, by the way. A local journalist in Eyewitnesses said Israeli drones fired 2 missiles, followed shortly after by a shell from an Israeli tank positioned 400 and 500 meters away from the crowd. The explosions caused many casualties. The crowd had assembled near a key road leading to the town of Bani Suela, an area that has seen weeks of ongoing Israeli military operations. And I have to point out the genocide splainers in the chat. So one person is saying, yeah, because Hamas doesn't use food trucks on purpose. All right, let's clean out those ears and pay attention because I already anticipated your genocide splaining. And I just answered that. Let's try it again. Let's walk through it again. The food truck was in constant communication with the military authority to let them know it's them and not Hamas driving the food truck. Do you understand now? Does that make sense? Let's continue. Nasser Hospital, the main functioning medical facility in the area, has been overwhelmed by the number of casualties. It is so overcrowded that the many wounded are lying on the floor as medical staff treat their injuries. Video showing the immediate aftermath of the incident and shared on social media has been located by BBC Verify to a location in Khan Yunis. I remember seeing a whole bunch of these videos posted on Twitter. I was wondering what in the world is going on, and you can clearly see civilians fleeing and running away because the Israeli military is opening fire on them. I remember seeing that, but I wasn't exactly sure of the details. That's what this is about. That's what that video footage is about. Unless, of course, you want to try to explain that away by saying, well, the video footage is all just made up. Right. Gaza's Civil Defense Agency spokesman Mahmoud Basel told AFP that at least 50 people were killed. Israeli drones fired at the citizens. Some minutes later, Israeli tanks fired several shells at the citizens, which led to a large number of martyrs and wounded, he said. In a statement, the IDF said a gathering was identified adjacent to an aid distribution truck that got stuck in the area of Khan Yunis and in proximity to IDF troops operating in the area. That's always the excuse, right? Well, we had some kind of operation going on in the area, right? Yeah, we've seen that so many times at this point. If that were true, okay, why aren't you more responsible in your fire? Why aren't you more responsible? I mean, let me put it to you like this. Let's say somebody breaks into my house. I go get my gun. I get ready to shoot them. But I just start spraying indiscriminately all throughout my house. Okay, I can absolutely guarantee you my wife and my kids will be shot if that happens. Right? That's what this is like. But it didn't happen just once. It continues to happen time after time after time after time after time after time, to where it's no longer a believable excuse. Our genocide explainer continues to ask, you think they bombed the food truck knowing they were civilians? I hate to believe such things. I hate to believe such things. But when you look at that scenario and many others, there is no alternative. I understand people being reluctant to come to those conclusions, but after about 2 years of this, it's no longer justifiable. I understand giving people the benefit of the doubt. I get that. All about that. At some point, though, you can no longer do that. At some point, though, the evidence, the data, leads to only one conclusion. It's very sad. Great Wall, appreciate you. He says, let's not attack the person for asking a question. He is here to listen and learn like the rest of us. No, he didn't ask a question originally. He mocked me. Go back and read him. He mocked me. He said, yeah, like Hamas don't use food trucks, blah, blah, blah. He was mocking what I was saying when I literally already anticipated him. So while I appreciate you attempting to stand up for him, I think that maybe you tuned in late and missed that part. He clarifies I was talking to people in the chat, not you specifically. Fair enough. Fair enough. Just clarifying why I'm being very direct with some of the people in the audience. And I think that it's kind of come to a point where you can't explain away some of this stuff, you know? The report continues. It said it was aware of reports regarding a number of injured individuals from the IDF fire following the crowd's approach, and the incident was under review. The World Health Organization said it had received reports of a mass casualty incident. This is again the result of another food distribution initiative. This is according to a trauma surgeon and emergency officer. I guess the excuse will be that, you know, he's being funded by Hamas or something. Great Wall's right. He says it's a heavy topic and sad news. Yeah, it really is. It really is, man. It's tough. It's tough looking through some of this stuff and reading it and just putting yourself in the situation, just imagining what that's like, you know, with you and your family going through this. It's just rough. It continues, there's a constant correlation with the positions of the 4 announced food distribution sites and the mass casualty incidents, he added, saying the trauma injuries in recent days were mostly from gunshot wounds. For weeks, medical staff have warned that Nasser Hospital could be overwhelmed and unable to continue to operate under the pressure of multiple casualties, lack of medical supplies, and Israeli evacuation orders in the surrounding area. Here's the weird thing. They can send pamphlets and flyers and tell people to evacuate, and they still end up hitting all of these civilians. Why is that? Why is that? They say that they had military nearby taking care of another operation. Okay. They couldn't warn the people of that. They couldn't warn the World Food Distribution Organization, hey, maybe don't distribute your stuff here. We got this operation going on just a few feet away. They couldn't do that. And if they didn't have time to do that, they couldn't wait before they pulled the trigger. They couldn't have evacuated the people first before they pulled the trigger. In recent days, the hospital has been dealing with an almost daily influx of casualties from shooting incidents near the aid distribution sites run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, backed by Israel and the U.S. in southern and central Gaza. In almost all those incidents, witnesses have said that Israeli troops opened fire, although there have also been reports of local armed gunmen shooting at people. Now listen to that. Israeli troops opened fire, according to witnesses, in almost all those incidents. The response from the IDF has usually been to say that its troops warned people not to approach them, and then fired warning shots when what the IDF called suspects acted in a manner deemed to pose a threat. The Israeli army has provided little or no details beyond this point. Yeah, that sounds familiar. Isn't that always the case? They'll do something like this, then they'll get grilled about it, and then they'll just say, we're looking into it, and we don't have any other details at this time. You might be able to give them a pass 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 times. But after, I don't know, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800 times, you can no longer continue to give them this pass. Israel does not allow international news organizations, including the BBC, into Gaza, making verifying what is happening there difficult. Exactly. So anybody who comes to you and says, well, this is just propaganda, it's not true, or there's two sides to every story. I understand that. I get that. Totally get that. Then why won't they allow journalists in? They say, oh, it's for their safety. Oh, that's weird. Because I just noticed a whole bunch of journalists allowed into Tel Aviv, where Tel Aviv is being bombed by Iran. Israel allows them in there. And Israel has allowed journalists into all sorts of situations that are very dangerous. And by the way, if a journalist wants to risk their life, that's their decision, not Israel's. To say, no, we're not going to allow independent verification of the facts, it's because you have something to hide. It's the only reason. The GHF has also responded to the shootings by saying that they should not be mentioned in connection to their operations, as the incidents are happening away from their sites. Yeah. But there is no doubt that thousands of Palestinians would not be gathered in desperate search for limited food supplies in those areas if it were not for the way that the new distribution system has been set up. The IDF has also told Palestinians not to head to aid distribution sites between 6 p.m. and 6 local time. But in order to reach the sites and have a chance of getting food, people have little option. Verified video from GHF sites show huge crowds of Palestinians rushing to try to get food parcels with no apparent control from the organization. It has already closed its sites briefly on at least 2 occasions to try to improve security. The other way of getting aid into Gaza, with around 100 trucks a day allowed in by Israel, has also increasingly seen people being shot as they try to get the supplies, whether from distribution points or from the aid convoy itself as it travels towards them. It's a sign of a breakdown both in security in Gaza and in the aid distribution system itself. Hamas has responded to the latest incident by again describing the aid centers as death traps, looting among a population desperate for scarce supplies of food, with criminal gangs, militia, and Hamas also operating for their own ends, has rendered the situation even more perilous. Critics see the GHF as enabling a plan by the Israeli government to displace Palestinians south into smaller areas of Gaza. But Israel, which has long sought to remove the UN as the major humanitarian provider to Palestinians, argues the alternative system was needed to stop Hamas stealing aid. On Monday, the UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk said that Israel was weaponizing food and called for a full investigation into the shootings. The head of UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, Philip Lazzarini, has said that in Gaza, tragedies go on unabated while attention shifts elsewhere. Yeah, like attention has shifted to the Israel's initiation of a war with Iran. Yet there seems to be no plan from Israel, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or international community to find a way to prevent the near daily killings of Palestinians as they take their lives in their hands to seek a meager supply of food. It has been 20 months since Israel launched a military campaign in the Gaza in response to the Hamas-led cross-border attack on Israel on October the 7th, 2023, in which about 1,200 people were killed and 251 others were taken hostage. More than 55,000 people have been killed in Gaza since then, according to the territory's health ministry. And let me point out something about this, the hostages. Let me point out something that people may not have thought of yet. So we just saw on the first day that Israel struck Iran, they killed a whole bunch of top military personnel, right? You remember that? They knew where they were. They said they got all this intelligence. They know exactly where they are, and they were proud about it and boasting about it. Okay. You got all this intelligence. Okay. But you haven't been able to find the hostages in 2 years? Hostages in little tiny Gaza? You haven't been able to find them in 2 years? Really? I'm sorry, I don't believe that. Of course they know where they are. It's not about the hostages. It's not about rescuing them. There's other reasons for this. There's other motives and intentions. And there's also reasons for perpetuating it. So while they boast and brag about how great their intelligence is, they actually indict themselves elsewhere. Because the point is, if your intelligence is that good, then you're without excuse over here, according to your own testimony. I also want to say something else that some of y'all might not want to hear, but I guess it needs to be said. I covered a few days ago an instance of Cardinal Burke saying that the Pope is persecuting the Catholic Church and is persecuting the faithful. How is he persecuting the faithful? Well, because a small group of Catholics are required to go to a liturgy using the Missal of 1969 instead of the Missal of 1962. And that's a persecution. A persecution that he's now asking the Pope to cease. What an insult to people who are actually experiencing real persecution. From his perspective, the Missal of 1969 and the Roman Rite of 1969 is a valid Mass where Jesus is received in the sacraments. But requiring people to go to that liturgy is evidently persecution. Imagine saying that requiring people to receive Jesus in the sacrament in this particular form of the liturgy is a persecution because they're not able to use this other edition from 7 years prior. It's a persecution. Such a slap in the face to people who are actually being persecuted. It's such a joke. And it shows how so many people are so sheltered and so privileged as to think that their little minor inconveniences are persecutions. Now, again, I've been critical of some of the restrictions in this situation. I think there are some legitimate points. To talk about persecution, though, that's just stupid. That's just ridiculous. And I also pointed out how it actually makes no sense of the Catholic position on the papacy anyway. Let me connect some more dots that some of y'all might not want to hear. I see so many Catholics focus on the dumbest things. They're reporting the Pope used the fiddleback today. Yeah, we just so needed to know that. The Pope used the fiddleback. Major breaking news. We got fiddlebacks, y'all. True story. But somehow we're turning a blind eye to this. Can we do both? Can we talk about some of these other things and some of the situations that are going on elsewhere in the world? Yeah, I think we can do both. But when we don't do both, and we only report on just minor things that really, ultimately, when you take a step back, it just doesn't matter. It shows how sheltered some of us are and how little perspective we have. Maybe how privileged we are in some ways. Or it shows that we just don't care. I'm absolutely certain that historians will look back on our time and wonder why in the world were they arguing over the dumbest things while all this other stuff is going on. I can see why some people would come to that conclusion in the future. I get it. And again, can you talk about both? Sure. That's the problem. It's not being done. There isn't a balance. So those are a couple things that I wanted to point out to y'all, for better or worse, whether it's received well or not. I think it still needs to be said. I'm really sad seeing these constant reports. I was trying to Google a situation where previously Israel bombed a part of Gaza, leveled it, killed 300 civilians in that strike. And they did it intentionally, according to their own sources. They knew that there were civilians there and there would be that many civilian casualties. According to their own sources, they knew that. But they said they went ahead and chose to kill these 300 civilians as collateral damage in their estimation, because they felt that there might be a really high military Hamas personnel in the area. So it's like, okay, are we going to risk the lives of these civilians to get this one guy? Yeah, let's go ahead and do it. Let's go ahead and kill the 300 civilians so that we can get this one guy. By the way, they never confirmed if that one guy was killed. Is that how you wage war? You mean to tell me they don't have the ability to go in there and surgically remove that person? They got to just start indiscriminately bombing the entire area. By the way, that's just one example among many others. But I wanted to go and find that specific example because that was the first example that stood out to me that made me begin to question the narrative of Israel. I go to look that up, and this story came up. This story that I just read to you. You know what else came up? a whole bunch of other stories from previous days and previous months of the same thing, just like this, and just like that one story I was trying to look up, happening over and over and over and over and over. There's such an abundance of them. There's so many of them coming so fast that you can't keep up with it all. When the smoke clears from this thing, whenever that happens, and people start to really process the aftermath of it all and all the data, it is not going to look good for Israel. It's not going to be good. And in reality, the Holocaust card and the October 7th card, at that point, will run out of gas. It was horrible what happened to them on October 7th. Horrible what happened in the Holocaust. But those cards were used to justify what they're doing in Gaza right now. And once people realize what all Israel has done there, they're no longer going to allow them to use those cards, and they're going to be deaf to it, which is sad. Which is sad. You'll notice as justification for everything Israel is doing, they're constantly using those two cards. Netanyahu, in his speech, telling why he's starting this war with Iran, same stuff. Nuclear capabilities, we've heard it 1,000 times. But also, we're going to preemptively do this because we're not going to allow another Holocaust, and we're not going to allow another October 7th. Ironically, he was the one who allowed October 7th, and he will stand trial for that charge. But he won't stand trial until this war is over. But he will likely continue to perpetuate the war so that he doesn't have to stand trial for that. So much more can be said, but I'll go ahead and leave it at that. And if you find this beneficial, if you find it helpful, let me know. I want to hear your feedback. Put it in the comment section. Of course, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Not that we like the content matter. I don't think any of us like what's going on. But at least if you appreciate me going over it and commenting on it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. All right, see you later.